Good day, YouTube. Today I'm going to look at a couple of different types of transformers. So this is a bigger one out of microwave, I believe it was. Might not have been, I can't remember now for sure. This is out of an old piece of testing equipment that I got that probably came from the 60s. I'll put it this way, it had vacuum tubes in it, which surprisingly there's still a market for old vacuum tubes. And we're going to look at a couple of these little guys. And I'll show you a couple that I don't bother to do. No. These ones are some that come out of some of the newer computer and higher end, so to speak, transformers that you plug in the wall to charge your computer or what have you. The reason I don't bother doing these ones is my yard gives me half decent price of transformers. But when you haul the wire out, it's coated wire. And it's really not worth the work to take and haul out the coated wire. Not to me, anyway. So I'll start with this one. This one here is segmented. It's got a bar welded on the bottom of it. Plus the segments are welded as well. And a real big fan of my Sawzall. Almost as much as my side cutters. And now I have copper on the floor. So. And with that, shoot, this had some fiberglass in it. Or maybe just the resin I smell, one or the other. Any case. And there we have a nice little bunch of copper. Plus what's on the floor. I'll pick that up afterwards. Another nice bunch behind this here plastic. And my yard's not too finicky on the varnish. Some yards are. But they're pretty happy to give me number 2 copper for all this. And I'm pretty happy not to have a box to separate. Because the difference they give me from number 1 to number 2 really isn't. That's a bit, but it's not much. And that I'll just throw in a coated wire pile. Now, the rest of the copper, we'll just set this thing up like so. And I will take my punch and hammer and just knock all this wire down through. I need a bigger punch. And you'll find yourself having to alternate side to side, because obviously it won't punch out straight. I think I got to a point where I can take the pry bar and just break the plastic. Seems one side stuck pretty hard there. Now once you get a few cords out, or a few pieces of wire, whatever you want to call it here, it'll start coming a great deal easier. and copper. More copper flying everywhere. And there's always layers and layers of plastic. It always makes Transformers fun. Transformers are a good source of copper. Some of them can be problematic to get the copper out of. A lot of that depends on whether or not they were heated up or when they were manufactured and where too, because some places that manufacture these really love these layers of plastic. And that is now just a piece of shred. Some places will call it number one steel. My area would probably call it number one steel too. But I really don't separate enough steel to make it worth my while. I just call it a shred, take one load in the trailer, forget it. It's a difference of $10 a ton. Now, it might be different for you. You know, you've got to know what your yard gives you for various material. Now I do find that the segmented cores have a better yield. And the reason for that is I find the segmented cores don't tend to have as much coated wire. And what I mean by segmented cores is if you look at here, this is a segmented core. You can actually take the layers apart and you'll end up with pieces that look like this. Some of them are just a straight piece like this one. Compared to the ferrite cores that when you put them in the vise and squish them, they just crack and split and blow across and all over the shop. The ferrite's still shred, but the copper itself is usually not as good. Now, this is a smaller transformer. And we're going to have a look and see what's inside of it. So what I do with these ones is I have a chisel that, just a regular wood chisel that I could thin down the edge or for a little ways back compared to being just a little angle here, or a very steep angle I should say. And that just to make it easier for me to drive it in between the segments. I may actually thin it back a little bit further just to make my life easier. So what I do here is I just try to find a spot where I can break it open, just like that. That's one half, and there, segment. And then I go over here and do the other half. And then I have opened up. Now, I'm not actually cutting the steel, I'm only cutting the copper. And then we go back to the vise. This, my little punch, and we just knock out the cores. Copper core plus plastic. And shred. Same thing again. And again, you're going to alternate side to side because they won't push out right straight. And then I always do mine over my copper bucket because when I take these apart this way, pieces are always going everywhere. Now, some of you might ask if it's worth doing this. You know, if I sold the transformer that I just broke down, the little one, as transformers, I might have got, 10-12 cents for it. Now that I've broken it down, and granted my math isn't exact because I'm a scrapper, not a mathematician. I got it broken down. The shred is probably still, 8-9 cents, something like that, give or take. But the copper that I took out of it, because it's clean copper, and copper is so much more value than a transformer as it is, I might have got 25-30 cents out of that. I did weigh one up earlier, not exactly like the one I just scrapped, but somewhere handy to it, and it gave me 31 cents worth of copper, compared to being worth 13 cents as a transformer. Now, before I go, I will break open one of the ferrite transformers just to show you how much copper you get versus coated wire. I'll use this little guy right here for an example. Now, I'm just put him in the vise, put my hand over it, and I always have my gloves on. Put a hand over it so it doesn't shoot everywhere and hit you in the face and whatnot. And that one didn't snap. Alright, let's squish it the other way. Alright. That time it broke. This one didn't have the satisfying crack that they usually have, but it did break. And now we got all the ferrite coming out of it. Ferrite core. It's still iron, but it's a very brittle, or a ferrite. Basically, it's a raw form of iron. And now we got some tape. Tape's obviously just going to go in the garbage. Alright, now I've got it to a spot where I can use the pin that I put in my bench. Now, let's see if I can adjust you guys over here. I just put them on the pin and spin it off. Now, that piece was alright, that's clean copper. Now where the problem comes in is the next one I spin off. Hey, coated wire. Now my coated wire is only worth about half of the price of my clean copper, number 2. So that's roughly 13-14 cents a pound. Or an ounce, sorry. My knife is never far away, and you may notice that I use a lot of Milwaukee gear. This is not an advertisement for them or anything as such. It's just what I prefer to use. And the reason I prefer to use it is the customer support that I get from Milwaukee. Not to mention the fact that their tools work out really well for me. I abuse the living crap out of my tools, and they still come back shiny. So that was another spot of good copper. And that we have is coated wire again. So, you know, about half, probably half, maybe a little bit better of this wire was coated wire. Hardly worth my time to strip it. But they are fairly easy to strip. You can strip them quickly if you got a mess of them. I just don't bother because, like I said, there's not enough there for me to bother with. So, like I say, the ferrite cores, I don't always break them apart because quite often they're all, or at least half, insulated wire. Segmented ones, great majority of them are nice clean copper like this. You know, my little box here was empty when I started. Right now I have, and I still got all that copper on the floor I gotta pick up. Turn on. Scale's a pain sometimes, it's slow. So I have 1307 grams, just because that's what this thing reads in. And I really should have figured that out. So that is, look on my other little box here, let me tell right quick. So that's 2 pounds, give or take, of number 2 copper. So, you know, that works out for me. Last time I stopped in, that works out to about $10. And I've been working at this, I don't know, maybe half an hour. I spent 3/4 of that time working on setting up the camera for the video. So, in any case, for today, that's all. I hope that helps you out with figuring out what kind of transformers you want to scrap, or if you want to scrap them, it might not be worth it. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to busting up transformers, and we'll see how much I make come the end of the day or the end of the transformers, depending on what comes first. So, look in the comments. If you like what I'm doing, hit like, give me a subscribe. Helps me bring the channel up. See how we go from there. Have a good day, y'all.